Hello, hello. Welcome to our second interview, all about the Sustainable Development Goals and what we can all be doing at home and at work, perhaps, to start to include them in how we think and how we behave. And I'm very excited today because we're meeting Jo Salter, who runs Where Does It Come From, which is a clothing business. She'll tell you much more about it and much more eloquently than I will. But it's lovely to have Jo back because she has been on our interview series and we were invaded by children and animals, neither of which you should ever work with, and for good reason. So Jo's here with us. I'm just going to do a little sneak preview before she talks about one of her the new clothing line that's coming out, which is based with an African fabrics and African production. I'm sure Jo will tell us more. So tell us a little bit about Where Does It Come From, Jo, and then perhaps we'll think about how the Sustainable Development Goals have worked with you, hopefully, and things that perhaps we can all do to embrace them a little more.
Okay, hello Claire, and thank you for inviting me on. So I'm Jo Salter. I am the founder of Where Does It Come From? Where Does It Come From.co.uk, just a quick plug there. And we are, just as it sort of says on the tin, we are all about telling you the stories behind your clothes. So we started up in 2013 to launch, that was children's wear we launched with, but since then we've gone on to create clothing for the whole family, so husbands, wives, mums, dads, grandparents, whatever, and we do clothing for businesses as well. And the core point is everything has a code on the label so that the customer can find out the whole story behind their garment. And I don't mean by that just back to the fabric, what shop the fabric came from. That is the farms where the cotton grew, all the way back to there. So it all came about because I was a new mum myself. I was dressing my children and I couldn't find out the stories behind where things came from. And one thing that really naffs me off is when you see something that says made in the UK and it's made of cotton, because how can that possibly be? So that's what asked the question that made me ask the question, where do things come from? And it all started from there. So it started off with having a code on the label, which was an alphanumeric code. We've got one of those on here. Bear with me while I search my scarf for its tag. But yeah, so you've got a code, a numerical code on the label. And then this year with the new African project and some of our newer shirts, we have a QR code too, so that people can just scan it with their phones. The reason we didn't do that to start with was because people didn't tend to have barcode readers on their phones, but most people do now. So we're very much about having as ethical and as eco-friendly and as fair trade clothing as we can. We call it kind clothes to the planet, to the makers and to you. And so we use processes such as using organic cotton, using rain-fed cotton, working with farming cooperatives, working with fair trade cooperatives, to make the clothing, so that we know that all the people involved were treated fairly and any impacts on the environment and our ecosystem are as kind or as minimal as possible. So carbon-free processes for hand spinning and hand weaving, hand printing as well, so as carbon-free as possible. That's really what we do. We have children's clothing made of hand-woven denim, so jeans, jackets and all sorts of things. We have organic unisex shirts. We have our new range of tunics. We have scarves such as this one I'm wearing. And for businesses, we work with them for, they can have shirts and scarves printed with their logos or any other design that they want. We're launching t-shirts this year as well. So for a lot of businesses spend money on promotional wear and staff uniforms, we can actually do that for them, knowing where everything came from and having that peace of mind. So that's it in a very big nutshell.
Oh, it's lovely. It's so exciting. I think what from my frugal aspect, I also like that your clothes are so good that people can then send them back to you when the kids have outgrown them and you sell them secondhand.
Yes.
To have another lease of life, because that's the quality that people are buying.
Yeah, because everything that we do is 100% natural fibres as well. I didn't mention that in my long nutshell, but we don't. They should last a really long time, and it obviously, if you get a nail and you scrape it against enough times, it will break. But generally, things last really well, and if we encourage people to care for their garments, to wash them at low temperatures, to not tumble dry, because those kind of things just destroy clothing. And if we love our clothing, then we want it to last, don't we? It's all about having things as long as possible. A lot of the people who buy our clothes pass them along through several siblings as well, which is always really nice. And I love getting photos and seeing people wearing things. We are all about loving your clothes. We're all about it. And we believe that if you know the story behind your clothing, if you've seen photos and videos of people making your clothes, you have a deeper connection and you will love them more.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So this month we're really trying hard to look at the Sustainable Development Goals, which certainly to me seemed very airy-fairy and sort of out there and things that other people did. And we're trying to make them kind of relevant and make people feel quite positive about them, hopefully. So I have them with me. I've been scribbling on them as I've thought of things since last week when we started. And I mean, I can see that your business hits quite a few of them. Is it something that you consciously work with now? Is it something that you knew about before you started, or how do they fit in with your business?
No, I didn't know about them before I started. I think we started before they had them, although there was the previous iteration, the Millennium Goals, wasn't there, that existed. But when we started in 2013, and the previous business I ran, we didn't have that. So I think probably what they are did trigger in me, if you know what I mean. So I think I definitely had a anti-poverty, pro-equality, kindness to the planet type thing. I think I've become more aware as time's gone on about the overconsumption issue, which I would now say is our top one. If you had said if you had to pick one goal, I would say number 12. We're definitely anti-overconsumption, which may sound a bit odd for a clothing brand, but I think it's about the quality side, making people love their clothes. You keep them for a really long time. You invest in your clothing. We deliberately don't want to be really, really, really expensive. We want to be totally transparent about how much everything has cost us to make, so people will be part of that rather than they just think, oh, that's a bit expensive, or I'm after a bargain or whatever. So I'd say number 12 is our key one now, but there are so many other ones. I mean, equality is a really big deal. We work with the cooperatives in India and social enterprises in Africa, where women are empowered and they are being helped with their lives. So that's a really important one for me. As a woman, presumably it kind of helps. But also we're learning so much more about plastic. We have never really been heavily invested in plastic. So we never used plastic packaging or anything like that. The children's clothes did have plastic buttons, which I didn't think about at the time, but we haven't done plastic buttons since about 2015 or 16. We use wooden buttons now. And the African collection we designed, I was so firm with people, I don't want any buttons, I don't want any zips, it's got to go over the head and down. And that would just save that one. So yeah, I mean, I suppose, again, not in a nutshell, but I feel totally behind the Sustainable Development Goals. And we did map 2018. We went across them and mapped where does it come from had hit, you know, where they were hitting us and where we were hitting them. And I feel really passionate about it now.
Pricing's a very difficult one. I mean, I think number 12 is a very difficult one because I think certainly my own, I've become aware, and I think generally our perception of what things should cost, sort of based on, you know, the majority of things we see, means I think we've got a really skewed vision of how much a shirt should be.
Yes.
Because there's been, you know, because the fast fashion thing that happened, it feels like a roller coaster, just kind of came out of nowhere and went bam, this is how you buy clothes now, this is what they cost now, has given people this really kind of this really skewed version of how much it is. And there was a campaign about, you know, a t-shirt shouldn't cost less than a cup of coffee. You know, if we really think about this, and that somebody's made, you know, the material's been manufactured and grown, or however it's produced, then a person has then, you know, designed and planned the item, then a person, probably several people, have made the item, then it's been shipped or whatever, you know. Our kind of relationship with that process has come down to, you know, well, it's a bargain because it's £1, without any thought about, you know, that can't possibly be right, can it? I mean, it's just, that's a nonsense that can cost £1, and someone along the way isn't massively losing out. So how do you manage to price things that are fair to the workers and to the sort of production process. I mean, I assume you do get people just saying it's just too expensive.
Yes.
You know, I can buy a shirt somewhere else.
Yeah, and we know that we would be more expensive than, well, definitely than fast fashion brands, but we try, initially I used to try and map against people like Boden and Marks and Spencer's, but for the Africa collection it just was so expensive to produce that we've had to go a little bit higher. And I think it's about the story as well as the clothing, and I do personally struggle and feel quite upset sometimes to think, how can I make it more accessible for people so that everyone can have lovely things, you know, but you just can't, and be fair to everyone. And like you say, a lot of it is a lot of people can't afford it, and that's just terrible. But some people could afford it, but their expectation is that they shouldn't be paying that much for things. So that is a difficult one for me personally, because I want to make it accessible for everybody. But maybe the second-hand market is the route, you know, to do that in a year or two's time. How we price is, I don't negotiate with prices with my suppliers at all. So I tell them what I want, and they will tell me how much that costs. If that's just not going to hit a price point, we'll redesign it, or we'll talk to them about different ways we can do things slightly differently. So for example, I was doing something with for a wholesale customer with drawstring bags, and they couldn't afford the organic cotton. So what we did was we went to the local farms, the local small farm producers who it's not certified organic, although it's grown in the same way, and we did it that way. So I would never say to my suppliers, we want that and we want it cheaper, or I'm going elsewhere. We've had the same relationships with our Indian supplier right from the word go, and I wouldn't change it. We just negotiate around design practices, because for me it's all got to be about trust and relationship with suppliers, and we can work together to make something work. If something genuinely won't work in the market, if it's just too expensive to sell, then we won't be able to do it. That's how I work. So, and then I work out the price to the end customer based on how much it cost us, added a small margin for, we don't make a huge amount of margin, just to pay for business costs.
Interesting stuff. Are there any goals that are sort of just not relevant to you, or things that you sort of haven't worried about, if that's the right phrase, or do you think all 17 are kind of in the mix?
I think all 17 are in the mix, really. Some of them more indirectly though. So for example, the marine life one, we don't do a huge amount of scuba diving gear or anything like that, or we don't do beach wear. I suppose you could wear a scarf on the beach, but I see it, the fact that we're not using any plastic or producing any microplastics, as indirectly affecting that. So yeah, I think that they're all, I mean, cities, the one around cities, again, I thought about this because of working with the cooperatives in India that we work with. They're all about keeping work in rural areas and people not migrating into cities. So rather than about making cities a nice place to live, we're about creating work so that people don't have to migrate to cities. So it's an indirect link there as well.
It's amazing. I'm so impressed that you've actually mapped your business to all of them and thought about, you know, had that as part of your process to to change what you're doing. Is there any in particular that you would like to do more about, if you know, moving forward as your business grows and changes? Are you kind of focusing on anything?
That's a very good question. I think it's just more about I'm personally, I love the inspiring people side of things. So there's the clothing production, which probably hits more around the equality and the poverty and the hunger. Maybe education would be a really interesting one to get more involved with, link up with some schools and help people. I suppose I try and educate in terms of inspirational. Are we talking about customers, trying to get customers to come on board with it and things like that kind of education. But with my other hat on, because as well as where's it come from, I'm also ethical business buddy, who I try and work with other brands to help them. And I've been working to inspire other brands to map themselves against the goals. And I've actually just got a bit of work in from our local university to map them against the goals. So it's trying to educate other people about the goals. I mean, I know what you mean about they seem a bit airy-fairy, really, but I suppose what I like about that is that it means you can make them relevant to the organisation or the people that you're working with, can't you?
Yeah, I just think initially, I suppose I thought they were for business, or they were for, big NGOs who are working against depression. I kind of saw them as out there and not really part of what I was doing. I'm a mum, and and I cook tea and I take people to Cubs and things. And I was quite excited when I actually sort of looked at them in more detail, I suppose, and actually sort of put them on the wall and had them in and around my my eyesight, literally, and started to think about them differently, and actually started to think, how do we impact these big topics in small ways, but in our own homes. And I wanted other people to feel that they could also be taking part. You don't have to be the sort of managing director of Oxfam to be having an impact in changing our world for the better. And I think I found that really quite exciting, the notion that that in small ways I could reduce inequality by teaching my children, just a really simple one, by hopefully raising young people who have more of an understanding of those issues and who can appreciate each other more, all those little things. Actually, I am tackling that in a small way. Responsible consumption, that you're number 12, I do think that's something actually I can't do it all day every day, but I can make choices. And as a family we can make choices. So our big thing that I keep banging on about, because it was just so amazing, was our kids decided not to have Christmas presents last year and this year. And we went on a holiday instead. So it was still consumption of a sort, but it was thoughtful, and it was planned, and we didn't create, we didn't just share out a load of wrapped up plastic tat to each other. We had family time, we had a week away. So even things which on the surface I think aren't relevant to me, actually when I have started digging a bit more, I feel that they are. Do you find that you're kind of, now it's part of your thinking process, you've taken it into the home as well?
Oh, definitely. I'm like you. I'm a very boring mother, and that's not calling you boring, but my children are like, oh, Mom, can't we just buy that? No, I'm not buying it. I'll walk into a shop now, I'm like, can't buy anything in here. I do think that the one of the things around being ethical is choice, and that is the power we all have. And that's not just the power of what we buy, it's what we don't buy. And I think that's so important. Making things yourself, mending things, cooking for yourself. I had you've probably done this loads of times. I had a horde of children around on Thursday evening, and one was a vegan, one was a vegetarian, and they're all quite sort of fairly healthy eating kids. Some of them like to eat dead stuff as well. But basically, I went into I think it was a co-op, our local co-op, and I thought I'll get some vegan burgers, and they did have vegan burgers, but they were quite expensive, and also they came with a plastic film over the top. I was like, I can't do this, and I literally went home and googled vegan burgers, and I made a big pile of vegan burgers, and I absolutely loved them. They were so popular. All the parents were asking me for the recipe. There was no plastic involved. So I think consumption and not consuming is also a really key one. And I don't think people quite understand, they think something's not relevant to them, how much power we have just by the choices that we make. Absolutely,
very much so. The last one, and you mentioned your the ethical business buddy, is about partnership, how we can work in partnership. And this is the other thing about the goals, which is why I wanted this month to be about kind of sharing, is actually a lot of it is only going to happen if we start working together better. And sharing good practice and good ideas, and as you say, inspiring each other. So what partnerships have you developed? I guess there's the obvious ones around your manufacturing process.
Lots really, lots and lots. I mean, I was thinking about this recently. I think I just made some amazing friends and partnerships going with other businesses. So my first partnership, supplier partnership, was with Moral Fibre Fabric, so based in India, and then since then, I've linked up with Kishore at Cardi CIC, and I do work with them as well on fabrics. So they're based in the UK, but using Indian Cardi fabrics. So that's another amazing one. And then for the African side, we partnered up with firstly an NGO called Proudly Made in Africa. Then Maya Miko done the production, and a company called Cottonia have done the cotton farming, cotton cooperative working. So lots like that. But then just things like running events. I mean, Sian and I worked together the last couple of years on Ethical Brands for Fashion Revolution in London, and we had 20 odd different brands coming and working with us. And then this year we did our Be the Change Awards, and we had oh goodness knows how many. We had, can't remember how many entrants we had now, it's gone out of my head, but we had tens of, I think we ended up with 12 categories times 5, so 60 finalists, and got to know all of them through watching their videos and got to know them. And the Be the Change Awards was all about how, so my phone's now gone off, I'll just hang it up. Be gone for 1 second.
Modern life.
Yes. Yes, that's dead. Yeah, so that was all about how do you, we were all about bigging up the smaller brands and trying to say to them, you've got a story to tell, come and tell it, we'll tell it for you, let's all get together and celebrate the fantastic work you do. That's the other thing I was going to say to you, because you were talking about feeling like as a mum perhaps you didn't have the power to change a lot. I think sometimes we put ourselves down a bit, don't we, and we think I'm not doing enough, other people are doing more, but we're all doing amazing things. Every little thing we do, we should feel proud of ourselves for the choice we make. And as I say to people, if you're in a coffee shop and you go up there with your bamboo cup or whatever, and you get a coffee in that, you don't know who's seen you do that. You don't know who that's reminded to think, I've got one of those at home, I'll bring it next time, or I'm going to get one of those, or maybe I shouldn't do this, you know, maybe I shouldn't buy that plastic thing because that lady didn't buy it. So I think it's just, you have a huge inspiration with every single step you take. Everyone should be proud.
That's lovely. That's a really nice reminder, isn't it, of yeah, just us making those small changes. I mean, I was chatting with Sian last week, and we were saying sometimes it's difficult to make the choices because there isn't always clarity or agreement maybe on what is better. Is it better to be plastic free or organic? Because it's quite hard to be both, actually. And so you were saying that with the cotton, you've gone for rain-fed cotton, or you know, so are some of those decisions difficult in terms of, you know, the right thing to do, or do you just make decisions as technology advances or as our understanding of sustainability changes?
I suppose I'm selfish. I do the things that seem the right thing to me. So one thing I talk about when I give talks on ethics is being ethical. It means something entirely different to different people. So for some people, cruelty to animals is the most important thing, and they would buy a vegan handbag which might have plastic in. For other people, having plastic is the absolute worst thing to have, and they'd rather have a natural fibre or leather or something like that. So none of them are wrong. It's just completely what is. They're all good in their own way, and I haven't yet found a way to have all of them, I suppose. So for me, it's natural fibres are important, animal cruelty is important, equality. For me, I suppose it's more about the origins and going all the way through, and the overall impacts of the supply chain are important to me. But I respect everybody else's choices, although some of them might personally make me feel slightly uncomfortable. I think if your ethics are not positive ethics or altruistic ethics, that's different. So if your ethics might be to make as much money as possible off the backs of other people, some people do have those ethics. I won't name any on this, but they do, don't they? But I wouldn't consider that a positive ethical model. So I think if you've got a positive ethical model and you're trying to do good and you're trying to help the world in general and society in the way you see fit, that's perfectly valid.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's about, I've decided, like you, I've just made my own decisions. I've decided that if it's, you know, if it's been a thoughtful decision, then it's the right decision at that time. It doesn't mean I won't change that in the future when I learn something else, or when more evidence comes to me. But I think it's about that consciousness. I'm thinking it through before I do it. and that's just taking me to that next level of consciously spending, consciously consuming, and I'm hoping that will see us through.
Yeah, no, that is definitely the conscious consuming is the thing, because that for number 12 in particular, that's really going to make a difference, because people who are, it's the irresponsible consumption that's causing the problems with all the landfill, with all the plastic in the oceans and those kind of things. If people carried on buying similar to what they're buying but bought a tenth of what they buy, that would solve a huge amount of the problems. You know, I mean, when we used to go to London for a work trip, we didn't used to go and buy a coffee and walk along with it, did you? That's a fairly new phenomenon. So it's how do we cut the waste out from that? You can sit down in a coffee shop, or you have a flask with you or something. So it's just, it's easy to do. It's just working out, like you say, just thinking about things a bit first.
When you've gone out to Africa and India, which I know you do often with your work, is it that I sense that they could be quite smug because they can sort of watch the West or the richer nations who've on the surface of it got it a lot better with all this consumable, you know, high price tag items, you know, their rooms and their shops and their lives are stuffed with stuff. But is there now a bit of a sort of throwback to that, which is saying, and we're making a bit of a mess because of it, and so the nations that haven't got to that consumerist economic state, in a way, are better off because they haven't got to stop doing certain things, and they can work on and spend more time on the protection of habitat, protection of life, you know, equalities, and those sorts of goals, where we're almost having to go backwards to start again.
But firstly, I'd say I haven't travelled hugely widely for various reasons, one being the footprint. So I've been out to India and seen our suppliers out there, but I was very fortunate with the African project because we partnered with the charity Proudly Made in Africa. They did all the due diligence for us, so I haven't had to go, because as you know yourself, it's the having children thing as well. But also the cost, I didn't feel justified in spending a couple of £1,000 on the project, you know, to go out there and do the due diligence, because so the charity did that for us, which was fantastic. I was really pleased. I have been out to India and visited all our supply chains out there personally, so that was really exciting. And I would say I can probably talk more about the Indian side because the African project's so new as well, but certainly in India there is starting to be overconsumption amongst the younger people, especially the well-off younger people are getting quite into fashion. But certainly the slight, not let me old people, but the older people, because of their spiritualist side, they are not so invested in things. I don't, in my experience anyway, they are probably naturally more thoughtful. Digressing slightly, doing business in Africa was very different, because it might be then I didn't come across it, but they didn't have that already ingrained sort of spiritualist thing that was there because of Gandhi and what happened with Gandhi. So linking into the work that Gandhi did, which is what we've done, he is all about ethics and about protecting your planet and protecting all the people, and all life is valuable. So that existed already in India. So it was a question of tapping into that. So the hand weave fabrics and the natural dyes and using block printing and those kind of things are all naturally ethical and naturally help the planet and naturally provide work for artisans. It's only when some brands then come in and start exploiting people and creating factories and things like that that don't work that way, but the stuff is already there. Haven't found that so much in Africa. So the social enterprises that we've worked in Africa have actually been set up by people that aren't African, people who've gone there and linked in with existing things. So it's quite, I'm not sure the culture is necessarily there. I'd say not that the Indian people are smug, but it probably is quite nice for them to look at us and say, well, you've learned what we've been saying. And I certainly know I had a meeting when I was in India with one of the cooperative people, because I was trying to get them to get fair trade certified, because I had when I first started the business, I had a real passion for wanting to have the little black fair trade logo on everything, and I joined up and I paid my dues to the Fair Trade Society, and then they said, well, you have to get all of your suppliers to get accredited with us. So I went along, oh yes, you really must get accredited with the Fair Trade. They're like, why? We've been doing this a lot longer than they have. We had all these systems in place long before you even started thinking about fair trade. And I'm like, I see your point, actually. So yeah, they've been doing it a lot longer. So probably not smug, but certainly very well into it.
Great stuff. It's lovely. So with the African chain, that's the tunics that are coming.
Scrunchies, scarves and pocket squares. So they are all for sale now. So we sent the last, so as you know, because you very kindly participated in our crowdfund last year, we pre-sold a lot of things, and then we got the Fair Trade Workshop, which is run by Maya Miko in Malawi, to make up our order with the fabric that we'd created, and about half of the stuff we bought then went out to the people who pre-ordered, and now we sell that on our website, the other half of what we've got. So yeah, so it's going really well. We've had some orders of those, and people giving us really good feedback. And in fact, I got sent an email from my friend the other day. She happened to be in a shoe shop and she spotted someone wearing one. So I got this photo of someone's back. We're like, oh, someone's wearing one.
Oh, that's really exciting, though.
It really is exciting.
It is. That's fabulous. Lovely. I'll let you go, because I know that you're a very, very busy lady, but thank you so much. It's so nice to find other people that are kind of working with the goals and celebrating them and shouting out about them. And as I say, I'm super impressed that you've actually managed to map, use them in a practical sense.
Yeah, no, to be honest, I would advise anybody, I would recommend that people do that, anyone with a brand, just literally sit down, write some notes, map yourself. If you want me to do it for you, I'm happy to do that as part of Ethical Business Buddy, but just easy enough to do yourself. Just write the list, write what you do, because you will feel proud of what you've done against them already.
Yeah, and then that's that lovely blueprint, isn't it, for what happens next?
Definitely.
So exactly. we wish you and Where Does It Come From every success.
Thank you.
The tunics from Africa are just glorious. I have got, I think, a picture of one here.
Yes,
look at that
prototype. I wore that yesterday, actually. That's the prototype we made. There's only one of those in the whole world, because the way that came about, with that's existing fabric. That red one wasn't one of the ones we made. We made the blue one for your scrunchie, a green one, and a pink and purple one, our own fabric. So they're ones that were made from the organic rain-fed cotton. So there is only one of those red ones. So when I wear that, I feel quite special.
It is amazing. It's just beautiful colours. Lovely. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll hear from you again.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Gonna wave more.